All right, let's get started. Welcome to Lunchtime Learning with Dr. Juanita Simmons and our MJJA Stop Red. If you will be requesting CLE credit, I will put the course code in the chat here in just a minute. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation by use of the chat or by taking yourself off mute. Unless you're asking a question, please go ahead and have yourself on mute so we don't interrupt the presentation. Please be sure and take the survey at the end of the session. It is vital for our grant funding and to make improvements to our sessions. This recording, along with other past sessions, will be available on stopRED.org, probably by early next week. There will not be a lunchtime learning session next month because we will be having our spring educational conference in St. Louis, Missouri. If you have not registered to attend, you are missing out. We have some great speakers lined up. Check out the agenda and get registered at mjja.org. The deadline for the hotel rooms is this Friday. I have shared this is the conference flyer with our plenary speakers, so you can get a glimpse of that. And next. So we will not have a lunchtime learning next month. So we will continue on in June, and we're going to have a mini virtual conference or an extended lunchtime learning event from 9 a.m. to noon. Let me go ahead and show you that flyer. Oh, hold on. Here we go. This is a free event. Everyone is welcome to attend. It will kick off with the Galt Center in their presentation titled Supporting Immigrant Youth in Juvenile Courts, followed by Dr. Summer Johnson and Dr. Juanita Simmons in their session titled The Impact of Past and Present Issues on Today's Youth. You can get registered today at stopred.org, or I will post the link for registration in the chat as well. And then finally, we have St. Louis City and their RED collaborative team is putting on a community forum event on June 5th from 10 to 12 at Harris Stowe University. So let me show you that flyer. And again, you can find all of these on stopred.org if you need a better look at them. It is free to attend, and the theme is from one youth to another. It will be a great time full of great discussion on RED and youth justice. If you need more information, you can reach out to Teresa Ramsey, and it's teresa.ramsey@courts.mo.gov. You can also just email me, and I can send you the flyer or connect you with Teresa. I would love it if you could go support St. Louis City and the work they are doing there in the community. I plan to be there, and Dr. Simmons is hoping to be able to make it there as well. And finally, the reason you're all here, hold on. I want to take the time to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And now I will finally turn it over to Dr. Simmons.
Thank you, Liz, and good morning to everybody. Good afternoon, rather. And I'm really excited that you have chosen to spend your lunch hour with us again today. We have a fantastic speaker. Uh, we are honored today to introduce Dr. Lucy Douglas as she joins in and leads a discussion on Do You See Me? Do You Hear Me? Um, and I think that this is a very relevant conversation right now, looking at storytelling and providing a safe space for youth to tell their stories. Um, Dr. Douglas is an expert leader with decades of experience in mental health organizations. She's currently working in with the veterans in their crisis line. She works quite a bit in the community and also including the work with as a responder, the crisis responder with the Veterans Association, clinical director with health organizations. She has been around in this field, including working with the courts and the Department of Human Services and Resources for substance use. So read her background. She's got a lot there and has been just a fantastic asset to our community. Dr. Douglas is one who I take a lot of pride in looking at what she is doing because of the connection that I have with her son, Dr. Ty Douglas, and the work that he's done in the community with male mentoring. And so I can see that that apple doesn't fall from the tree. So without any further ado, I want to introduce to you the wonderful sister, Lucy Douglas. Dr. Douglas.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be able to be here. I find it an honor to be in your presence, and I'm looking forward for us to having a discussion. So let me share my PowerPoint, and then we can get going. So our topic today is, do you see me and do you hear me? And I really want us to be able to think about that in the context. We're not talking about just, do I see you wearing that beautiful dress, or do I hear the content of our conversation? I'm asking you, do you see me? Do you hear me? And it's important for us to understand the importance of merging or understanding the difference between the verbal and the nonverbal communications in our interaction with others. This became a part of my journey as a clinician. I initially worked as a crisis responder for a community mental health center. And when I first started off, it was really, really, like most things, it's very intense. You're trying to get it right. You're trying to stick with the timeline. And I had this amazing lady that came in, 35-year-old lady by the name of Sarah. She came in on a day and it was extremely busy. And my secretary said to me, "Oh, you've got a live one. She is pissed." It's like, okay. Now I'm looking at all the people that are left in the lobby and I'm trying to figure out how are we going to get this lady in a timely manner and to be able to execute what I need to get done and then have her move on to what was next so I can move to the next person. I went out and I introduced myself and I brought Sarah back. And when she stood up, I could see that she was extremely angry. I don't know if you've ever met someone with so angry it looks like their body is puffed up or swollen. This lady was oozing anger. And I thought, okay, I brought her back, being diligent and trying to get her information, typing as I was going along. The computer was here, she was here. I was able to look back and forward. I wasn't making any progress. She was giving me one-word answers. She was angry in how she responded to me. And I finally just thought, you know what? I'm not getting anywhere with it. So I stopped typing and I turned around and I looked her directly in the eye and I said, "I don't know what happened before you came to see me, but I want to know what happened. Because I hear the anger in the voice and I see your pain. Can we talk about it?" And she looked at me and she burst into tears. And it wasn't just a crying, it was a weeping. I don't know if you ever heard someone who's weeping. It sounds like they're weeping from their soul. I allowed her to cry, to get it out, and then I just asked her to tell me what happened. And she proceeded to share a story about how she had been referred by DHR. She'd made some poor decisions. She was having to jump through these hoops, and she went to her case manager and told her the only thing that was left was her assessment. Did she need to get it done before she got to see her kids? She was scheduled to see her kids that day. This caseworker told her no. And so she went to have the family visit with her kids, and they told her that she couldn't see them because she hadn't done the assessment. And so she shows up to me and she's angry, she's frustrated, she's hurt, she's disappointed. And I have to identify, how am I going to gather this information from this lady? What was the priority? Was it the information, or am I going to take the time to actually see her and hear her? An hour and a half later, after we had just really kind of sat in the moment and talked, I was able to get the rest of her information within 15 minutes because she happily told me what I needed to know. And when she left my office, I had to sit down to take a few minutes and ask what just happened. I thought I was listening. I thought that I could get the information in, but I realized I needed to do some things differently. And it really challenged me to start paying attention to whether I am actually listening or hearing, or paying attention to what someone is saying and paying attention to what I see. So in order for us to be able to understand what takes place, is that we have to think about some core concepts in seeing and hearing. When we're seeing a person, we're observing the facial expressions, the body language, the nonverbal cues. So in Sarah's situation, I could see that she was angry. Her body language, she was very stiff. She was very focused on what I was saying. She was very, very unhappy. Those were the verbal cues that I was seeing. I could see it in her face. I had to determine how I was going to make her feel safe, help her to be seen, help her to be respected. And then I had to determine how to be present in the moment with giving her my full attention. Because while she was angry, she wasn't angry at me, she was angry with the experience that she had. And very often as humans and as clinicians, we miss really pivotal moments with others because we're so focused on the task that's before us and what's coming after. I often wonder if I had missed Sarah that day, what would have happened? The other thing is the importance of hearing the person. And hearing is an active engagement. It's active listening to words, to tone, and emotion behind the message. So when I am trying to explain something, I'm very passionate in how I describe it. When I'm angry, you know that I'm angry. You can also look at my face. My face will often tell you what I'm not saying if I choose not to speak it. But when we're actively listening to someone, we get to hear the things that they're actively saying, even in not just in how it's being said, but the tone and the message behind it. Creating space to understand, not just respond. Now, this is even significant when we're talking about not just relationships with clients, but if you're married and you're in a significant relationship, you know that most of our arguments start or come from a space where somebody's not listening, all right? And then we are responding to what we heard, but we're not understanding what's being said. And then it is important that hearing is what is said and what's unsaid. Hearing is what is said and what is unsaid. There are many conversations that are had, and there are things that are left on the table unsaid, but they're understood, and people walk away with a perception or an assumption that this is what you mean, when in reality, that's not what you meant. So the goal of seeing and hearing someone is to make every person feel safe, understood, and respected. We talk about having active listening techniques. That's the hearing part, where it's important that we say less and listen more. Allow space for the person to talk without interrupting. So often for me, it means that as someone is sharing their information and I'm listening, there are times I want to chime in, I have to remember, be quiet, just listen, they're not finished. Using minimal encouragers like nodding, I see you, tell me what's going on. Using gentle cues that show up. As a working on the Veterans Military Crisis Line, I don't have the luxury of physically seeing the person that I'm talking with, but I do have the luxury of hearing and hearing through what they're saying to understand and interpret what I need to know. Paraphrasing and summarizing, that's a huge one that I use because quite often as someone is talking, you can have someone that is finally opening up and sharing what it is that they want to say and is coming out in this huge rush. And yet there's no way you're going to remember all the information. So very often I'm confirming and understanding by reflecting back what I heard. So I may say, Mrs. Jones, okay, so what I heard you say was, or Sarah, I heard you say that you went to see and have your visit with your kids today. You weren't able to see them because you were told that you didn't complete the assessment and you're really distraught and upset by this. Validating their emotions. It sounds like it was very difficult for you. So I was able to, as I listened to her, able to sit in the space with her and acknowledge the emotion that went along with it. So the nonverbal part of the communication is seeing. And seeing is probably the most important.
H.G. Williams, how may I help you?
Seeing is probably the most important part because it's the nonverbal communication that speaks sometimes louder than what someone is saying. body language, whether a person is leaning forward and they have good posture to signal engagement and willing to connect. So when I am seeing someone in the office or seeing a client, I would make sure after that that I actually sat and looked at them. I stopped typing, I stopped writing because I would say to them, I'm just write. If I have to take my eye off and write something, it's because I'm still listening, but I'm just making some notations so I don't miss what it is that you're sharing. But I had to make sure that my body language reflected that I was seeing them and that I was also hearing them. Eye contact is very important. Now, we live in a very global world, so culturally, there are many people that aren't going to necessarily look us in the eye. I grew up in an age where my grandmother and my mother said, you look people in the eye, they need to know, but they're going to tell whether or not you're telling the truth. Well, that doesn't always work in every setting. So maintaining appropriate eye contact shows the genuine interest and respect, but also respecting the cultural nuances of the people that we're engaging with makes a difference as well. Having a calm demeanor is really, really important because it models helping to de-escalate the anxiety and create a safety space for you as well as working with the clients that I work with. So very often I encounter someone, they're yelling, they're cursing, they're very distressed. They're coming to my office and they may be expressing themselves in a way that could be seen as being very frightening or concerning for security. I've learned to model a very calming demeanor and also in the way that I may speak or the tone that I use. Though often I will lower my voice because it forces them to listen. But I allow them to be able to express what they're feeling, to be able to get it out. And I watch as they are de-escalating, then you can hear it in their voice. You can see it in their face. You can see it in their body language. It's almost like a relief. And then you're able to engage and interact in a way that is communicable for both of you. There's an awareness. We're always staying conscious of the person's facial expression and emotional reaction. I work with people who are emotionally deregulated on a regular basis. So I do need to pay attention to what they're doing because what you don't want is for someone to attack you. That doesn't mean that they will, but there are some people that will. And so if we think about people who work in law enforcement or probation, or if we're engaging with people, we don't know what people are going to do, period. But paying attention and being conscious of the facial expressions is one way to be able to know when something is shifting and changing. And from a positive side, being able to pay attention, that also lets you know when there's been a shift or a change within their expression, within how they're interacting, and let you know how the tone has changed and how you may be able to really sit with them in these moments and acknowledge, tell me a little bit more about what's going on. Tell me your story. Therapeutic communication strategies include using open-ended questions because we want to be able to encourage more detailed responses. We're going to focus on the feelings, and we start with the how, what, and why. We'll say, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or tell me why that happened? Or, what was the reason behind that decision that was made? Very often people are uncomfortable using silence. Silence is a wonderful tool because it gives a person space and allow them time to process, because sometimes they're saying so much and they're finally maybe hearing it for the first time. So when you use silence, it's not a disrespect that you didn't hear them. It's an acknowledgement that what they said was so powerful. Creating space for reflection. I'm someone that has to think about what I want to say next. So if I'm interacting with someone and they're trying to pressure me to say what's next, I'm not always going to be able to do that because I haven't had the chance to process it and filter and determine whether is this the right thing to be able to say in this space. But also being able to know how to be able to ask for space if I'm not able to express what I'm thinking. And sometimes people don't know what they're feeling in that moment. And so giving them the space is important to be able to identify that. Resist the urge to fill the pause. Very often as clinicians or people that we're engaging with someone, if there is a space or a gap, we want to fill it because we're either trying to get the information or maybe we're uncomfortable having to have that space. We don't know what to do with it. We can learn to pause and allow it to naturally take its course. And I've discovered as I've gotten better with that a person can have that space and then they will continue. Let meaning emerge naturally. If you try and force the stuff or the information to come out of someone, you're going to totally miss the whole meaning of what it is that they're trying to share. Give them the space and the time to be able to do that naturally. And then it's not a situation where you're interrogating. It's them honestly giving you the information that you can should be able to ask some additional questions. It's important to make I statements Like I feel rather than you make me, like I feel overwhelmed by the idea of having to just be still and tell you that I'm struggling. You know, avoid blaming language, like you are the reason why something's not working out. And I'm not implying that that's the language that you use, but very often when we're interacting with individuals in which we are trying to get their story or have them share, they will use verbiage like other people have the control, they make me do it. You are responsible for that. You are responsible for not letting me be able to see my kids. Allowing them, iMessages allows them to take ownership of their emotions. And that's really, really important because very often people know how they can express anger, but they don't know the other emotions that go along with what they're feeling. Sometimes they don't have the language or the verbiage for it because they haven't felt safe enough to share it or they haven't been given permission to experience it. I don't know about you, but growing up very often, if I got licks, my mother would, and I was crying, she'd tell me, stop crying. That didn't mean I still wasn't feeling the emotion or the hurt, but I would dry out my tears. But what was that teaching us? That's teaching us not to express it. And so we encounter people on a regular basis that have not been given permission to express their emotions. And in whatever setting they find themselves in, they don't express it, but it comes out as anger. When the other thing could be regret. It could be rejection. It could be disappointment. It could be hurt. It could be shame. It could be guilt. So understanding the importance of allowing them to be able to use I statements, allowing them to avoid using blaming language, taking ownership of their emotions, and modeling healthy communication. So let's talk about the best way to be able to communicate, because that's the other part, is teaching them how to show up and to have a conversation, and to teach them how to be able to ask for what they're needing in a way that's appropriate and kind. So the barriers to that are very often we're judgmental and we make assumptions. I made an assumption when I saw Sarah, oh, this is going to be a hard assessment. And while it may have started out like that, what I discovered was that my judgment was wrong. It wasn't going to be a hard assessment. I was encountering somebody who was in pain. And while I may have wanted to gather the information, I owed her the right to be heard and to be seen and to be able to not push through my agenda, but very much show up and let her know that she mattered in that moment. Very often we have to slow down and stop rushing and interrupting. And that could be challenging in the profession that we work in, because we may have a time limit, we may be trying to get things done. This person could actually be interrupting what I'm trying to do, and it wasn't part of my plan. But taking the time to rush and not interrupt, I've discovered I still get to do the things that I need to get done, but I've created a moment and a safe space for that person to know that they could have that conversation with me. And the benefit of that is that very often the clients that I have that other people will consider to be difficult, I don't have the same challenges with them. They'll call and say, Miss Lucy, I messed up. Here's what's going on. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about accountability and what we need to get done. The importance of the barrier of sympathy. When we feel sorry for someone instead of empathy. Empathy is feeling with them. So let's talk about enhancers. Empathy is understanding and sharing the feelings. So with Sarah, I sat there and I understood. She's a single mom. She didn't have access to a kid. I've been a single mom. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like to not be able to see my kids. I wouldn't want to know that I had done everything that I was supposed to do, and then you give me something else and tell me that I didn't complete it when I asked you for what I needed to do. I understood that. Patience and active presence. Give them the time to be able to share and express. You have to earn the right to hear their story. It's not automatically given to us. Like many of us, we assume when someone comes in, they're supposed to tell us everything. We get upset even if they don't tell us the truth. You discover that they lie. If I think about it, I'm not necessarily going to be someone that's going to come up and tell you all of my story. I don't know you. You haven't earned the right to be in my space. So I look at it in the same context in the same way. Cultural sensitivity and awareness. This is huge. So I'm originally from Bermuda, which is not a part of the Caribbean. I have a lot of friends who are Caribbean. Now, if you start calling Bermudian or a Jamaican or a Trinidadian or a Bayesian, any of somebody from a Caribbean island outside of the wrong culture, then you're going to see the other side of them. There's no, I'm Jamaican, or I'm Bayesian, or I'm Bermudian. You want you to be aware that our cultures, while we're similar, our cultures are unique to who we are and geographically what's made us who we are. We encounter people on a regular basis. Do we know the cultural nuances of them? Do we know what it's like to interact with someone who is Hispanic or someone who's Asian or someone who may be Muslim? What do we know about them? So we have a responsibility to educate ourselves and become aware about the different cultures and ask them to share with us. Tell me a little bit about your culture. Is there something specifically that I should know that would be relevant to us being able to work together? Listening to understand and not reply. That's a word that we discussed previously, but it is very important for me to listen. I don't have to agree with what you're doing. I don't have to like what you're doing, but I want to understand why you're doing it and what is the context and the premise in which that is founded in. So some key takeaways. The person is the expert of their own experience, and that's very true. I haven't walked in their shoes. They're the one that needs to tell me what their experiences are. Active listening fosters trust and connection. And communication is largely nonverbal, which is very, very true. And it's important to listen to understand. So why are these 4 takeaways very significant? They're significant because the individual stories matter. Why knowing their story, knowing their story is very important. It's important not only for us to be able to understand how to be able to show up and work with them, but it's important to help them to understand their story and have them share their story because their stories are part of their identity and part of their self-understanding. Their stories help to define their values, aspirations, and self-worth. Their stories tell us about their resilience and their persistence and their strength. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to show up the way that I understand it. But if I understand what they've been through, then I'm able to also empower them by saying, hey, you said that you did this, this, and this. And I've identified that that's a strength that maybe you hadn't thought about that it actually is there. So it is important to identify and understand and to create self-understanding when they know their story. I mean, we know their story as well. It provides healing and resilience. Sharing hardships helps process trauma and finding meaning. And that's really, really important. We have a country and a community of people who are in pain. And we can no longer ignore it. And it's coming out in so many different ways. And it is impacting everybody. So we can no longer pretend that I don't see it, and I can't pretend that I don't hear it. I have to look at ways to be able to help them to express it. In the healing and resiliency process, and in them processing their trauma, it could mean that they're journaling, or you ask them for the kids, they could be writing a story. It could be drawing. It could be dance. It could be movement. It could be poetry. How do you describe what your story is? Telling your story doesn't have an age limit. It's important for us to be able to know what the stories are even within our families. My mother is 88 years old, and one of the things that I love to do is sit at her feet, and I'll say, well, Mama, tell me about what it was like growing up. And she will tell me about all the things that she used to do and the fun that she used to have. And I can tell when we're getting to a painful part because there's a change in her body posturing. There's a change in her tone. There's a change when she talks about regret and sadness. And then I get to love on her and let her know how grateful I am and the fact that I still have her around and the fact that I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for her. But the more that she shares with me, the more that I hear the story, the more I understand how important it is to understand the legacies that are left behind. Connecting and empathy. The narrative reduces isolation and fosters authentic bonding. We are created for connection. We're not meant to be isolated. But when people are struggling emotionally and they feel as if they don't have community, the one thing that they always talk about is that I am alone and I don't have anybody. And so community, connection, showing empathy, allowing us to be with them in the process, helps them to give that connection and community. And telling their stories helps them to see that they do have someone that's similar to them. Empowerment and legacy. Owning your narrative declares your experience is valuable. And when I'm talking to my mom, I realize that I'm getting to understand the legacy and the shoulders that I stand on. I get to hear the stories because then I can share that with my kids and my grandkids, and I get to thank her. There are narratives that need to be declared so that their experiences can be celebrated and can be valued. And if we don't know that, if they don't have the time or don't have the ability to be able to share it, then they are literally missing out on being able to empower themselves and to celebrate the legacy and the things that they come from. Dan P. McAdams says, by curating our stories, we turn events into coherent narratives of who we truly are. I love to hear stories. I love to know what makes a person who they are. I love to be able to celebrate that. I think it is very important. No, I know it is very important that you hear the stories. Your ability to do what you do as MJJA is part of hearing the stories of all the individuals that you work with, the juveniles, even interacting with the families. No matter what department or what agency that you're in, you are a part of allowing someone to tell their story. And very often, as you are showing up in these spaces and providing these opportunities and these tools for others to use, it is also important to remember to make sure that you are taking time to honor your stories, to honor the work that you are doing, to ask yourself the important questions are, do you see yourself? Do you hear yourself? Are you giving yourself the time and pouring into yourself to be able to make sure that you're taking care of yourself? Are you hearing when your body and your mind and your spirit is tired and weary? When I get irritable and I'm tired and I know that I'm not in a good space, I don't need to be interacting with anybody. And so I give myself permission to have what's called a Lucy timeout, where I'm not trying to have a conversation with you, and I would give you my disclaimer. This is not the best time. Let's not do this. And if you are unwise and you don't pay attention, then you get the full brunt of it, and I'm not apologizing. I'm not always proud of those moments, but I know who I am because I'm able to see why I'm at that space. And I've had to learn to be able to be deliberate about taking care of myself unapologetically. I want to encourage you to reimagine what it would be like to actually take the time to hear and see others and to allow them to tell their stories. But I also want to challenge you. What would it look like if you took the time to see and to hear yourself and to tell your story? Thank you.
This was absolutely wonderful, dynamic, so much information. And so it sounds so easy and simple, but so dynamic. And so I'm grateful that you stopped to share with us. We're going to open up the floor for comments and thoughts, and I'm seeing the thumbs up coming across the screen. And we want to also remind you that the evaluation forms are posted for you to evaluate. Liz, I'm going to open up the floor for discussions, but I'd like to see if there's something that you have that's posted or if there's something that you would like to share before we open up the floor.
No, ma'am.
All right, the floor is now open for discussion and questions. And as much as possible, I know you all are having lunch. If you can just kind of show up and let's talk a little bit. I see Wendy and Thomas and Esther and my friend Teresa and Adrian, a lot of you, and we're just so glad that you're there. What would you like to share, and what are some thoughts and questions that you have? How useful is this information? Let's hear from you. Floor is open.
This is Thomas Hood Jr. Can you hear me?
Yes.
As she spoke about culture sensitivity and awareness, it reminded me of doing an intake with a client, and I had to consider their spiritual foundation because they were coming from, I think, Somalia, and everyone had the same last name and the same birthday, but different. And that kind of threw me a little bit. But then the individuals started talking about their spiritual foundation. And that kind of opened me up a little bit more to listen more because I had never had to deal with an issue like that. So sometimes we had to consider the spiritual foundation that they come with. Then I have to ask myself, is the spiritual part of the cultural? But then I divided it and I accept one as individual, each as individual entities. So I had to consider where they were spiritually in order to listen to them better.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I worked at a psychiatric hospital for quite a number of years, and in my country, religion and spirituality is really, really important. And what I discovered was that a lot of psychiatrists, when they were doing their diagnosis, they would always say that they were psychotic with religiosity, and then we had to really educate them to say, no, that's a cultural norm. That's a belief system that they have, and we need to honor that, not weaponize it against them, but honor that those are the foundational pieces that help to make them who they are. Now, does it mean that some people do have religiosity? Yes, but we need to take it on an individual basis. I'm really grateful that you were able to have that moment with that individual.
Thank you for sharing that. Other comments, and I'm excited to see that Ben Berkheimer is in our audience too. Esther, we see you. Esther, we don't hear you.
We do have
Something is,
Hear me now?
okay, there you go.
Okay. So what resonated in my mind is we all live in a time where everything is scheduled out. We have paperless intake, so it's computer. You got to get everything in when you're talking to a client. But the fact that she used her example, how she stopped typing and she just listened. That's so important because a lot of times if they feel like they're just part of the process
Mhm.
in like hers,
Mhm.
they're not going to open up. And we know that them opening up and getting to the root of what the concerns are is the only way we can really help them. So I like the fact she used that example because a lot of us can relate to trying to get the intake in, but yeah,
Yes.
you need to
Yeah.
stop.
I appreciate you sharing that. You know, when we are willing to see and hear them, we actually are given credibility. They will give us latitudes to be able to do and say things to them that they may not like, but they trust us enough to be able to build the relationships, and that makes a big difference. I don't know about you, but if I'm talking to someone and they're looking at their phone, and you're not listening to me, that means you're not paying attention, and I'm offended. So I don't want anyone to do it to me. So I think it's important that as clinicians, we pay attention to what is the message that we're saying.
I see Rick Gaines has the mic. Hi, Rick.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Good to see you, Dr. Simmons. Dr. Luke, I thought that was a really good presentation. I think about myself even just this morning as I was meeting with one of my staff, and I'm sitting there typing an email, and even though I call myself listening and hearing, but what you truly talked about really, I think we can all take lessons from as to not only how we conduct ourselves with people that I truly feel comfortable with, and I think I know they feel comfortable with me, but I assume probably more so than I should that they've got my attention or I've got their attention, but yet based off of what you just presented, truly I need to exercise more of what you talked about and do that listening and hearing, because I was thinking about it like, aren't they the same? And truly there are, but they're not. And I think that what you talked about just resonated with me, and so I appreciate the presentation, and I can't wait to get the recording to have other people look at this from our circuit.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
There's a comment from W.D. Million. Those of us who practice in juvenile courts must, one, always remember that there's a backstory and that people's lives are complicated in ways that we can never imagine. Two, we are interfering with what is the most important thing in a parent's life, their children. Three, that it will take a while to build trust with the parent because of the system and the circumstances. So it seems that we should always be in an empathetic mode as we build trust, and all that you have spoken about are critical in building trust.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. When I worked as a clinical director for an outpatient substance abuse program, very often the clients that were being sent to us were court referred. And so they're coming under duress, they're already pending charges, and then we're sitting there asking them all these questions. And I had a clinician who came into my office one day, she was livid. because the gentleman who she had just screened, based on the information that we received from the probation officer, wasn't lining up with what he was saying. And so she was really, really angry. He's lying to me. It's okay. So if he lies to you, why are you upset? Why are you expecting that he would tell you his truth? Like, who are you? And she was really affronted, but I had to stop her and say, listen, do you come into my office and tell me, and when I ask you questions, do you tell me everything? She says, no, I don't have to. I said, right. He doesn't have to tell you everything. We want it, but he doesn't have to. We have to learn. I have to earn the right to hear his story. I've got to spend more time with him. He's got to get to know me. I'm not necessarily safe because I represent a system. He's been sent to me by another agency. Yes, he did something wrong and there are consequences, but can we imagine what that looks like? And so as we went, that became part of a training that I was delivered in doing with my staff to remind them we are not entitled to hear their story. How do we make people feel safe enough that they'd want to tell us? And if it means that it's in 3 sessions instead of 1, that we get everything, then fine. But build the rapport, take the time to create that safe space that they want to tell you. And then when you've created that safe space, what you find is that same individual, whether they've done something good or whether there's something bad, they're going to come early and say, hey, Miss Lucy, let me tell you what happened. Or they may tell you that I've been clean for 28 days after finishing my program, but the place in which I have to live and rest my head every night is a place that's forcing me to want to use drugs. And then I, in turn, have to identify what resources are available to get you in. How do I support you in that? But if I don't create a space where you feel safe, then I miss a moment to be present when you really need me.
You and I had a conversation about how far to go, and when, and to, how to cut off at a time, because many of us don't have the type of background where we are equipped to handle some of the emotional concerns. And so there are some references that can be made. Could you speak a bit on that? And Liz, I also see that someone else has made a comment, but would you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
I think it's important, like our even as a clinician, I don't have the ability to heal anyone. What I do have the ability is to be present and listen. And if you find that someone is sharing more than you can manage, and quite often as a crisis therapist, I've had to maybe find a way to close down what they're going to say because I don't want them to overshare because I'm not going to be the therapist that they see on a regular basis. So what I do is I will acknowledge, Mrs. Jones, I want to honor the fact that you have shared with me. But I don't want you to overshare because you're going to be seeing another therapist, and that's going to be the person that you're going to see on a regular basis. And because your story is very valuable to me, and I don't want you to have to continue to share it, can we talk about how we can keep you safe in this moment? What do you need to be able to help you get through until your appointment at this time? Do you need to come back and see me again? But if you're a lay person, just be willing to say, I don't have a solution for that. But let's identify some resources that may be within the community that I can get you tapped into. Here are some things that I know of. This is why it's also important to be able to know what's available within your community and what the resources look like. But more importantly, not just knowing it, but are these resources still accessible? Because sometimes we'll give them a sheet, but maybe that program is no longer there anymore. Right? Sometimes it means calling for access. If you're a person of faith, does your church have resources that you might be able to share with somebody? Do you know someone who's a clinician who you will be willing to refer them to, that you can literally say, if someone says to you, look, I'm looking for resources, or a counselor, or I'm needing services in this area, you can actually give them some resources to be able to say, hey, I'd encourage you to check this out. So it is an overwhelming feeling because sometimes we feel we need to be all things to everybody. We just have to show up and listen and know how to be able to point them in the right direction.
I thought that there was some other comment that was in the chat, Liz, that came across the screen.
There is.
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
Thomas Hood Jr. says we can learn a lot from the LG. LGBTQ community when it relates to working with people well. I've asked the question, why are you comfortable with telling your story to me? The answer has always been because you see me.
Yeah, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that's very important when we're working with the LGBTQ community and anyone in general, I think we have to be careful what our judgment and our biases are. And very, very often, depending on the communities that we work with, we think about their actions and we don't see them. If I'm honest, we need to get out of the bedrooms of people. If we just be frank. And just really understand what are the things that are significant, right? I remember I had a gentleman who came in and he was in a domestic violence situation. And he was gay. His gender didn't matter to me. He was in a DV situation. And I literally had to educate the police officer that was on site to say, hey, I need you to take a report and I need you to be present. I need you to listen. And he needs to feel seen and heard to make sure that he got access to what he needs. We do a disservice when we allow our biases and our judgments to get in the way. If a person has a need, that's a need. That's what we need to be focusing on. And there's no way that we can sit here and judge what somebody does or make assumptions because we never know when the shoe is on the other foot, what would we need? How would we want to be treated? I would hope that somebody would show up and be kind and compassionate to me, no matter who I was, what I did, that you would see me and hear me and acknowledge, here are my needs. Even ask me, Lucy, what do you need in this moment? How can we support you in this? And identify that I can't help all of those things, but we can choose one thing today to be able to address. So yes, you are right. That community is a really resilient community, and we can learn a lot from them.
Okay, are there other comments, thoughts and comments? I think this has been a really important presentation today that will assist us in our professional and personal lives. I see a lot that I can deal with in dealing with my grandson, who is now going through adolescence in a very heavy, hard way.
Mhm.
And so we're grateful that you have stopped today to share with us and so much information and the knowledge that you have. And so with that, if there are no other comments, please drop your evaluations in the drop box so that we can, know how to better serve you. And we thank you for being here. Um, I'm grateful that we have so many of you who have come today. And if you did not see the announcements that were made earlier about the May conference, the June mini virtual that's coming up, and then the town hall meeting that's taking place with Teresa's group in St. Louis, then please take a minute to pull up our website because that has been announced and we'd like for you to participate. Dr. Douglas, do you have any closeout words before we close out today?
Well, I would just like to thank each and every one of you for what you do. We need you. We need you to take care of yourself first. First. I also like to share with you that no is a complete sentence. I've learned the art of being able to say no more. I would encourage you to utilize that as well. And just continue to be the heroes that you are. And you make a difference, and our world's a better place because you're here. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you.
Thank you. So on behalf of MJJA, our Jeff Barlow, Vonda, Tammy, Liz, we just say thank you all for joining us with your lunch today. And have a good rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week.